You're watching Reality Check. Tonight we focus on the spiraling controversy over a draft law, a draft Environmental Impact Assessment or EIA law that is drawing flack from across the board, from activists, from lawyers, from all those who are considered to be stakeholders in ensuring that our environment is protected. Now, just to start off, to explain what is an EIA or an Environmental Impact Assessment, it's basically a method of evaluating the likely environmental impact of a project, and there is a range of ways that this is done, including public consultation. Now, the government has brought the latest EIA 2020, which is meant to upgrade the last such law, which was in 2006. But a range of objections have been raised to this draft law, and what we're doing is just summarizing the key ones, and we'll get into more as we go along in the show. So, number one, the concern is that the projects that are operating without clearance can receive a clearance later, what is called ex post facto. That's one problem that those who've seen the law have with it. The other is that the violators can pay the penalty and continue operations. About 40 industries have been exempted from prior environmental clearance before going ahead. These includes projects which are labelled as strategic by the government, somewhat vaguely. Information on strategic projects is not going to be made available to the public. Also, public feedback on the draft law has been curtailed. And finally, and somewhat bizarrely, only the government and the project developers themselves, not the public, can report violations. All right, joining us tonight on Reality Check, we have with us Professor Madhav Gadgil, a renowned ecologist, known, of course, for his benchmark work on the Western Ghats. Also with us is Dr. D.K. Agarwal, President, PhD, Chamber of Commerce and Industry. M.B. Rajesh, who's a CPM Kerala State Committee member and former MP, is with us. Sunil Alag, independent business consultant, and also Nitin Sethi, journalist, reported extensively on the environment and member of the Reporters Collective. Let me just start by asking you, Professor Gadgil, you obviously have had a chance to look at the current draft, and are the concerns, some of those that we outlined, are they broadly those concerns that you have as well, or would you like to add to what is bothering you about this draft?
Well, yes, those concerns are valid. But you said what is being exempted is strategic. This is puzzling because if you look at the details, all the industries which are categorized as red industries, that is highly polluting and hazardous as per the Central Pollution Control Board, they are being exempted. I don't know why and how could one call these strategic.
Okay.
Now, this kind of pollution is going to lead to horrific consequences throughout the country. As a part of our Western Ghats study, we looked at the Lote Chemical Industries complex, which had a common effluent treatment plant which was not operating,
right, and
the pollutants were getting into the water supplies of all the neighboring villages. Some of the industries were actually digging bore wells to put the pollutant into the groundwater so that the groundwater was getting poisoned. The Vashti River and Dabol Creek, which are very rich fishing grounds, were getting depleted of fish, and the fishermen were losing livelihoods, and the local people, a very valued source of protein. Now, all this is going to be exempted as strategic. It's not completely senseless to call this strategic,
right,
the most hazardous and polluting industries. And if that happens,
yes,
then it will go rampant. The whole country will be completely polluted. And who will suffer? Currently, the protests are coming from basically English-speaking urban middle classes, and the protests are very valid. But real sufferers will be people in the country, in the countryside, the villagers who are getting their water poisoned. And they have no access to any of this information. Most of them don't know English. I have spent 35 years in Karnataka, so I know all the local languages.
Yes.
People are calling me from villages in Kerala and Tamil Nadu and asking me, what is this, sir? Please tell us. We have no idea. We don't know English and we don't know Hindi. And we have no information on what this EIA is. And they are going to be the real victims.
Okay.
So, they are not being informed. This is completely and utterly unacceptable.
Okay. All right. Dr. D.K. Agarwal of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, what tends to happen at these occasions is that the debate becomes very polarized. You'll see environmentalists, activists critiquing the law, and you will see largely either acceptance or silence from industry. Is that unfortunate, given that the environment affects everybody? So, in that sense, while you may want projects to be cleared, you may want clearances to be faster and smoother, do you also take on board that there could be concerns about the way that this draft law is shaping up?
Frankly, if you look at how many suggestions and how many concerns which have come to the Environment Ministry,
yes,
it is more than 17 lakh letters and emails,
yes,
which have come to the ministry. That clearly shows that there are many concerns. Many of the provisions are not in accordance with what public believes it should be. And I must tell you that industry is also for the environment. And it is not a question of villagers or activists. It is actually a question what should be done, because environment has to be protected at all cost. No industrialist would want that at the cost of environment, he would never want to set up his manufacturing facilities or development of any project.
So,
however,
yes,
we believe that there are many provisions. You know, you have to look at the intent of this legislation.
Yes.
Because last legislation was done in 2006 on
yes,
EIA.
Yes.
And the world has changed in last 14 years.
So, what do you see as positive in this, if at all?
Yeah, there are few things which are positive. However,
such as
that because
such as what? If you could give a few specific examples.
Yeah, like the construction of buildings till the size of 1,50,000 square meter. You know, invariably we have seen that all the projects so far which have gone to the Environment Ministry, though it has taken time, but they have been all cleared. And particularly projects up to 1,50,000 square meter, you will not find even one example where environment clearance has not been given. So cases like this where you have
so to those, just a second, for those who may not know, what you're saying is that one of the provisions of the draft law is that projects which are up to 1,50,000 square meters are exempt from clearances. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, you're saying that's one of the positives, which
and
is
the
something
other thing
you're
is
saying.
That,
yes.
Yeah, the construction of these flyovers, construction of expressways. You know, we have to see that there are certain strategic areas where done. Maybe they have done away with the public consultation.
Okay.
You know, the whole intent is the ease of doing business. But I must tell you that seeing that there are 17 lakh responses, suggestions,
yes, yes,
and there have been many concerns.
Okay.
I would tend to believe that there are many things. Even I believe that where you have done away with from 30 days, you have reduced the consultation to 20 days.
Okay, you're saying you also have concerns. Fair enough. Let me just bring in Nitin Sethi. Now, Nitin Sethi, you've reported extensively that even before this draft law, there have been a series of ways in which environmental protections have been systematically reduced. So, in that sense, is what the law doing, in a sense, almost making that status quo, those earlier dilutions, or does it actually sort of fairly significantly make things more worrying?
I think this is what the government has done in the last 6 years when it comes to environmental standards and laws and regulations. And this is a regulation, this is not a law, is to take small steps towards diluting it successively for separate different small sectors when, say, an industry is asked for it or industry bodies ask for it. But this, to my mind, is where a substantial leap of faith is being taken in the wrong direction. This is where you are looking at almost a subordinate legislation is what it's called, the rule overriding the law itself and the intent of the law.
And I think that's why you see, while a lot of people have seen dilutions over the last 6 years, piecemeal project clearances, which are flagrantly in violation of regulations, ethics and laws. Why people are concerned at this stage is that you are in some sense rewriting, as Mr. Agarwal rightly said, a law written back in the 97, but you are rewriting it with rules that the parliament will have no oversight over. The parliament will never get to debate this, and you are rewriting, as Dr. Gadgil rightly put, the entire environmental governance structure of the country just by executive orders in some sense. As we know that these public consultations with the court had to force into extending, it's also just a mere consultation. The government does not need to adhere or listen to that at the end of the day.
Okay. MB Rajesh, from what I understand, the left government in Kerala has been quite vocal in their opposition to the law, if I am not mistaken. Is that right, MB Rajesh? Because one of the things, because the question though is that, are you yourself, though you might be opposing the law, but are you yourself listening or practicing measures to protect the environment? Because, we have Professor Gadgil on the show, and he authored that report on the Western Ghats and the importance of preserving its ecosystem. But when one looks at the tragic havoc that the rains have once again caused in Kerala this time, it has raised that question about whether the government is seized of those concerns.
Of course, the government of Kerala has been very serious about environmental protection, and the government has adopted several measures to ensure environmental regulations and protection. As far as Madhav Gadgil committee report is concerned, yes, we had some reservations against some of the proposals. However, we were in agreement with many of those recommendations. But
would you say
yes,
that? But if you're saying you followed all the, if you are observant of the concerns and the rules and the environmental protection, how would you describe the havoc that the floods cause every time? Wouldn't you say there's an element of a man-made disaster?
See, it's not merely a man-made disaster, but of course there are some concerns we need to address. See, this is a result of several years of a development model that has been practicing throughout the country, including Kerala.
Right.
Yes, it's a different issue, but let me come to this particular EIA 2020.
Yes.
The CPIM has already submitted a detailed note to the government of India, and we have expressed our disagreements in detail on this EIA 2020. If you allow me, I will quickly make 6 or 7 points.
No, sir. MB Rajesh, sorry. With all respect, 6 or 7 points becomes very difficult. You understand, time is short and we have many panelists. But broadly, is it safe to say that your concerns are similar to the ones that have been voiced by most people? I'm taking that as broadly along those similar lines. But I do want to I'll come back to you, MB Rajesh. But coming to Sunil Alagh, look, the fact is that one can understand that the government, any government, would want there to be an ease of business, especially right now the economy is struggling. But should it be at the cost of the environment? Already we have some data from the sort of Environment Ministry website that close to over 2,000 projects have got environmental clearances under this government already, even without this diluted EIA. And the government flaunts that as saying, look, we are really trying to put projects on track. But now with this EIA, the worry is that you're even further in the balance between environment and projects. You're tilting it more and more away from environment?
You know, you are talking to a convert right now. Over the years, I've been for industry all along. But what I've learned in the last few years, and that's very important for everybody to understand, is that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. We can never forget that, because the pandemic and the climate change has brought home certain points which didn't exist earlier. So therefore, it was all right to create all the dams, create all the stuff that we were giving all the environment clearances. And therefore, it is important not to swing one way and stop all progress. The economy is important, but it's important for us to get together now and rise above party levels now, because look, the rules were there. Why were the rules flouted? There's just Parliament can keep on passing rules. Now what has happened is, in the new one, you've actually opened all the doors. You know, a typical bureaucrat will put down, well, if you cross 1,25,000 square meters, if you do X, if you do Y, you are actually opening the floodgates for nobody, not even the courts can stop it if this sort of a law is passed. So therefore, it's very important for us to understand that, look, we have ways of creating jobs. That's important. You can actually have going for labor intensive in all the catchment areas, employ everybody. There is many ways, and I think the Prime Minister today is, I'm not getting into party line, he's open, give him all the suggestions, because that man understands. I'm not saying that everybody in the party understands or everybody in Congress understood. So all of them have done mistakes, but today, let me give a one quick one. But you know, like a liver. One second, very quick one. Maya's my doctor, Maya's a doctor, and she told me that a liver will regenerate itself if you don't damage it beyond 75%. We are getting very close to that, and this is the time to stop and take a relook and rethink and then go in for it. That's all I'm going to say.
Sunil Alag, I have to confess, you caught me by surprise there. I didn't see that coming from you. But on the point of listening in, though, on the point of the fact that you're saying this government is listening in, one of the complaints has been that actually the window for public opinion or for public feedback has been narrowed and reduced. And that's actually one of the complaints about this, even though we've got 17 lakh, feedback, as we just heard there from Dr. Agarwal, a record number of responses. But Madhav Gadgil, yes.
Vasu, it's a draft at the moment, and it's about time we moved in and said, look, listen to us. Don't let it become law as yet.
From what I understand, I thought that the feedback window is now closed, but I'll just come to that in a second. But Professor Gadgil, now the fact is that one also needs industry, one needs jobs and the revenue that they generate. So do you believe that there are ways in which the draft could still be, could be sort of modified, that it would also allow industry to flourish and thrive while also ensuring environmental protection?
Well, certainly, but if you look at the models available throughout the world, then there is no question that industry can flourish with very careful environmental protection. Germany, Austria, all of Scandinavian countries are amongst the most prosperous and most advanced industrially. They are also all the countries which take great care of the environment. Outing environmental regulations is not necessarily the way to progress industrially, and it is a complete, actually, shield for industry to be lazy. Let me give one concrete example. The Ballarsha paper industry recently acquired a junked machinery from abroad because it was being sold cheap, because it was polluting excessively, and installed it in their paper mill. And that led to havoc in Ballarsha town. So industry, I am afraid, if it is given this kind of protection, is unfortunately taking great disadvantage of it. The industry should become forward-looking and follow the example of, let's say, German industries. I think there is no question that the kind of license to pollute given to industries is leading them to unnecessarily abuse.
Okay, let me bring, okay, fair enough.
License.
Let me bring in Dr. Agarwal on this, that Dr. Agarwal, how would you respond to that? Because on one hand, industry keeps saying there is too much red tape, there is too much regulation. On the other, the argument is actually, it's the other way around. There isn't enough regulation.
Frankly, if you look at before 2014, we all know that files were not moving, a lot of projects were getting stalled. So we have to look at the intent of this legislation. The idea was that why the files were not moving. And, of course, environment is important. It is non-negotiable. But if the files are not moving because of extraneous reasons, then there is a concern. So the whole idea of this new legislation was to do the ease of doing business, to create regulations in such a way that they do not delay the projects unnecessarily. However, I just want to give you an example. I agree that post facto approval cannot be made a blanket rule. But if you look at IIT Madras, it constructed a building of on 52 acres out of a deer park. But it was given a post facto approval, though it did wrong and it was not supposed to be happen that way. But now, since it is an institute of national importance, and if you underneath, if you demolish that building, nothing better will happen to the environment. Similarly, there was a nuclear plant which was given post facto approval in 2013 in other parties' government. But that was right, because that was something of strategic importance. So you have to isolate the cases. You cannot make it a general.
Okay, you're saying you can't make it blanket. Nitin Sethi, you were sort of smiling at the point about the stalling of the projects by the previous regime. The general drift seems to be that it's all happening under this government, the dilution of the laws. But because you've had a longer view on this, is it fair to say that? Or were there serious concerns also about the legacy of the UPA when it came to environmental concerns?
So I'll, instead of anecdotes and citing my own experience, I'll cite data. In the 10 years or 8 years of UPA regime, there was 97% or more of all the projects that came before it eventually got cleared. In this 97%. Government, in the last 6 years, more than 98% of the projects that have come before the government have eventually got cleared. Now, if the industry is complaining, as Mr. Agarwal was, about problems, I can, if you read between his lines something, obviously as an industrialist he cannot say, so let me say it on his behalf. What happens is the files get delayed. They got delayed in the UP regime, they get delayed now as well. What industry is asking for is removal of that discretion that the bureaucracy had, which would delay the process, which will lead to rent seeking and corruption. Eventually, it will get the clearance anyway. Now, this has been happening in the last 6 years. If you go to the National Green Tribunal, you'll see enough cases where evidence of this is being produced even for the last 6 years, up to date. Now, in this, there was a need for a reform because this licensing system, if you want to call it that, was neither helping the environment nor the industry. What instead in that process the government is attempting to do is reduce the discretion that the experts have, reduce or diminish any supervision that the society at large and citizens have, and increase the political discretion that's available to it to clear or not clear projects. To my mind, that is the most perverse way of looking at reform. I don't think it will help good industry. I don't think it will help small players who want to set up good businesses because they will not have the influence to go all the way up into the political system.
Right.
This will help large projects get away with less monitoring, less transparency, and it will allow the government greater discretion at the political level rather than at the technical level.
Right. Last word from you, MB Rajesh. Now, you said that you've sent all your objections to the ministry, but I'm just trying to understand here, and also for the ordinary viewer, that do you think, MB Rajesh, it's still possible to try and bring some changes or to put the brakes on the EIA, or is it now too late?
see, we hope that if there is huge public pressure, the government will have to listen to the concerns raised by the people of India. This EIA 2020, its priority is business over environmental protection. And it's an instrument to override earlier court judgments, both of NGT and Supreme Court judgments. And it is an attempt to appease corporate interests, especially as far as the opening up of mining sector for commercial mining is concerned. This is in line with that opening up of mining sector. So in effect, the whole focus is of doing business and appeasing corporate interests.
Okay. Well, those are strong words. Let's see what the future lies in store for the draft notification, but certainly a fairly wide and almost, you could say, consensus building around the concerns in that draft. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you so much for watching Reality Check. That's all the time we have. Goodbye. Good night.